Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his warship, the UES Retribution. His hands gripped the metal railing as he stared out at the stars. 3 months had passed since the attack. 3 months since the aliens had murdered 50,000 innocent people. The Zephyrians had come without warning. Their ships appeared over mining station Omega-7 like death itself. The families living there had no chance to run, children playing in the station corridors, scientists working in their labs, miners coming home after long shifts, all dead in minutes. The research facility on Kepler 442b suffered the same fate. The Zephyrians burned it to nothing. They said it was to show humans their place in the galaxy. They wanted Earth to bow down and serve them like all the other younger races. "Captain," came a voice behind him. Morrison turned to see Dr. Amy Rodriguez. Walking onto the bridge, she carried a datapad in her hands. Her face looked tired. The war had aged everyone. "The Council wants to meet," she said. "They claim they want to help us make peace with the Zephyrians." Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Peace? After what they did?" Amy nodded. "Admiral Carter says we have to go. The Council has power over most of the galaxy. We need to hear what they have to say." The Galactic Council was old, very old. The Etherians who led it had been alive for over 100,000 years. They ruled from a massive space station called Concordia Prime. Every alien race in the galaxy sent representatives there. Morrison had read the files about the Council. For thousands of years they had kept peace through a simple system. Older races ruled over younger ones. Stronger species took what they wanted from weaker ones. They called it natural order. Amy explained more as they traveled to the meeting. "The Council sees us as children," she said. "Humans have only been in space for 300 years. Most of these aliens have been traveling between stars for millions of years. So they think that gives them the right to decide our fate?" Morrison asked. "They think it gives them the right to decide everything," Amy replied. The journey to Concordia Prime took 2 days. When Morrison's ship arrived, he could not believe the size of the station. It was larger than Earth's moon. Thousands of ships from different worlds docked at its ports. Inside, the Council chamber was even more impressive. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling. Each level represented how old and powerful each race was. The newest species sat at the bottom. The ancient Etherians sat at the very top. Morrison walked into the chamber wearing his military uniform. He carried no weapons as Council rules demanded, but his anger was weapon enough. The Etherian speaker, Veltar the Wise, looked down at Morrison from the highest seat. The alien was tall and thin, with skin that glowed like starlight. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the vast room. "Captain Morrison of Earth," Veltar began. "We have called you here to discuss the unfortunate incident between your species and the Zephyrian Empire." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Incident? They called the murder of 50,000 people an incident?" Veltar continued. "The Zephyrians are an ancient race. They have ruled their part of space for over 1 million years. Humans, while promising, are still very young. You have been in space for only a few centuries." Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of alien races watched. Some looked bored. Others seemed curious. None looked like they cared about the dead humans. "The natural order must be maintained," Veltar said. "Younger races serve older ones. This is how peace has been kept for 50,000 years. The Zephyrians simply enforce this order when humans refuse to accept their rightful place." Morrison felt his anger growing. These aliens spoke about natural order while children lay dead in space. "However," Veltar continued, "the Council is merciful. We offer humanity a generous settlement. You will evacuate all colonies beyond your home system. You will pay yearly tribute to the Zephyrian Empire. In return, you will receive protection as a protectorate state." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Morrison. The aliens expected him to be grateful. They expected him to bow down and thank them for their mercy. Morrison stood slowly. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but cold. "You call the murder of 50,000 innocent people an incident," he said. "You call genocide a rightful enforcement of order. You expect us to reward mass murder by giving up our freedom and paying tribute to the killers. Murmurs began around the chamber. Some aliens looked shocked. No younger species had ever spoken to the council this way. Morrison took a step forward. You have made a fundamental error about humanity. You think because we are young, we are weak. You think because we are small in number, we will submit to any evil you permit. Veltar's glowing form seemed to dim slightly. Captain, you forget yourself. The council has offered you mercy. Do not mistake our kindness for weakness. Morrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. Mercy. You offer us slavery and call it mercy. You allow genocide and call it order. Let me make something very clear to all of you. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to stop. We don't care how old you are, Morrison said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. We don't care about your hierarchy. We don't care about your natural order. And we sure as hell don't care about your peace if it means bowing down to murderers. He turned and began walking toward the exit. At the doorway, he stopped and looked back at the stunned council. Consider this our formal response to your mediation. Morrison left the chamber in complete silence. Behind him, the Galactic Council sat in shock. For the first time in 50,000 years, a younger species had rejected their authority. In the coming days, news of Morrison's words would spread across the galaxy. Some would call him brave, others would call him insane. But everyone would. Remember the moment when humanity chose defiance over submission. The Etherians, in their ancient wisdom, had expected gratitude. Instead, they had awakened something they did not understand. They had awakened human stubbornness in the face of impossible odds. The war was about to begin. News of Captain Morrison's rejection spread through space faster than light itself. On every human world, people gathered around news screens to watch the recording. They saw their representative standing alone before the entire Galactic Council, refusing to bow down. Admiral Lisa Carter called an emergency meeting aboard the orbital fortress New Geneva. The massive station hung in space above Earth like a metal moon. Inside its command center, Earth's military leaders gathered around a large table. Fleet Admiral Roy Henderson was the first to speak. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. We've counted the ships, he said. The Zephyrians have 10,000 vessels. We have 200. General Patricia Webb leaned forward in her chair. She commanded the Colonial Marines, the toughest soldiers in human space. Numbers don't tell the whole story, she said. Our people are angry. Recruitment centers are packed. Every human world wants to fight. Intelligence Director Carl Brooks opened a data file on the table's screen. The situation is worse than just fighting the Zephyrians, he said. The entire council is panicking. They're afraid other species might follow our example. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, who had returned from the council meeting, nodded. I intercepted communications between council members. The Krillian merchants are demanding action. They're afraid their own slaves might rebel if humans get away with defying the council. Admiral Carter studied the star maps floating above the table. Red dots marked Zephyrian fleets. Blue dots showed human positions. The red greatly outnumbered the blue. What are our advantages? Carter asked. General Webb smiled grimly. Motivation. Every human knows what's at stake. We're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for the right to exist as free beings. Director Brooks added more information. Our technology is different from theirs. They rely on energy shields and plasma weapons. We use kinetic, barriers, and railguns. It might give us some tactical advantages. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, Zephyrian Admiral Korthak received new orders from his emperor. Korthak was a veteran of 100 battles. His scales were scarred from combat, and his eyes burned with the fury of his race. The orders were simple: destroy humanity completely. Make them an example that would terrify any other species thinking of rebellion. Emperor Zethmor had been insulted beyond belief. No younger species had ever dared to speak to the council as humans had. The very foundation of galactic order was threatened. If humans succeeded in their defiance, the entire system might collapse. Korthak began gathering ships from across the Zephyrian Empire. Battle fleets that had been patrolling distant borders were recalled. Garrison forces left their posts. Within weeks, 3,000 of the Empire's finest warships began moving toward human space. Back on Earth, Captain Morrison found himself promoted to Admiral and given command of the Human Defense Fleet. His flagship was still the UES Retribution, but now 50 other ships followed his orders. The mission was simple but desperate. Delay the Zephyrian, advance long enough for the colonies to prepare their defenses. Morrison gathered his captains in the briefing room. They were men and women from every human world. Captain Lisa Kane from Mars, Commander Pete Sullivan from the asteroid belt, Captain Roy Mitchell from the outer colonies. "We all know the odds," Morrison told them. "We're outnumbered 60 to 1. In a straight fight we lose, so we're not going to fight straight." He activated a holographic display showing the Proxima Centauri system. "They'll come here first. It's our oldest colony and closest to Earth. We'll make our stand here." "Captain," Kane raised her hand. "What's the battle plan?" Morrison's expression was grim. "We're going to show them that humans don't fight like other species. We're going to introduce them to something called total war." He explained Protocol Midnight to his officers. It was a strategy that abandoned traditional fleet tactics. Instead of trying to outfight the enemy, they would sacrifice everything to inflict maximum damage. "Every ship will be equipped with antimatter charges," Morrison said. "If we can't win, we'll make sure they pay a price they'll never forget." The captains listened in silence. They knew they were being asked to die, but they also knew that their sacrifice might save humanity. Commander Sullivan spoke up. "My ship carries a crew of 300. They all have families back home. Will this actually work?" Morrison nodded slowly. "The Zephyrians fight for conquest and glory. We're fighting for survival. That's the difference that will matter." As the human fleet prepared for battle, the Zephyrian armada approached. Admiral Korthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator. Around him, his officers prepared for what they believed would be an easy victory. "The humans have 50 ships," reported his tactical officer. "Shall we demand their surrender?" Korthak laughed. "Let them fight. It will be good practice for our crews. Besides, we need to make a statement to the galaxy." The two fleets met at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, the space around the red dwarf star filled with ships of war. On one side, the massive Zephyrian armada stretched across space like a metal continent. On the other, the tiny human fleet looked like fishing boats facing a hurricane. Morrison stood on his bridge watching the enemy approach. His crew was silent, focused on their instruments. They knew they were about to make history, one way or another. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Zephyrians are demanding our surrender." Morrison smiled coldly. "Open a channel to the entire enemy fleet." When the connection was established, Morrison spoke calmly. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. You have committed genocide against our people. You have demanded our submission to murderers. You have made a simple mistake." He paused, looking directly into the camera. "You think this is a battle between two civilized fleets. You're wrong. This is an extermination attempt against our species. We're responding accordingly." Morrison gave the signal. Across the human fleet, ships began moving toward the enemy. But they weren't moving to fight. They were moving to die. The Battle of Proxima Centauri was about to begin, and nothing in galactic warfare would ever be the same again. 6 months after the Battle of Proxima Centauri, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have imagined. The Zephyrian Empire, stung by their massive losses, deployed 8,000 ships in a coordinated assault on human space. Their new strategy was simple and brutal. Surround each human world and destroy everything until the population surrendered or died. The first test came at New Terra, a colony world with 50 million people. Governor Pete Sullivan received the HFY Zephyrian surrender demand and broadcast his response across the planet. "They want us to evacuate our home," Sullivan announced. "They want us to abandon everything our families built here." My answer is the same as Admiral Morrison's was to the Council: no. The siege began 3 days later. Zephyrian ships surrounded New Terra and began systematic bombardment of orbital facilities. The aliens followed their traditional rules of warfare. They targeted military installations first, giving civilians time to evacuate. They expected the humans to see reason and surrender to save lives. Instead, they got Dr. Amy Rodriguez. Rodriguez now served as Earth's Director of Strategic Operations. In the months since Proxima Centauri, she had overseen the development of humanity's most controversial weapons program. Authorization granted, she told the technicians at the hidden base on Luna. Deploy the Prometheus units. The Prometheus. Weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were ships, but with no human crews. Instead, they carried artificial intelligence systems with a single program directive: find and destroy any vessel with Zephyrian energy signatures. The AI ships had been built in secret facilities throughout human space. They were small, fast, and nearly invisible to most sensors. But most importantly, they didn't distinguish between military and civilian targets. If it was Zephyrian, it died. The first Prometheus attack came without warning. A Zephyrian medical ship carrying wounded soldiers from Proxima Centauri simply vanished in a burst of antimatter fire. The AI ship that killed it was gone before the escorts could even target it. Within days, similar attacks began across the Zephyrian Empire. Cargo ships disappeared between systems. Passenger transports were found drifting in space, their hulls torn open. Trade routes that had operated safely for thousands of years became death traps. Emperor Zethmor called an emergency meeting of his war council. The reptilian leader's scales had lost their luster from stress. Around the table sat his most trusted advisors, all showing signs of the strain. "How many ships have we lost?" Zethmor asked. General Krextar consulted his datapad. 400 civilian vessels in the past month. The humans seem to be targeting our supply lines and civilian infrastructure. "This is impossible," declared Admiral Vorthon. "How can such a primitive species build ships that our sensors cannot detect?" Dr. Amy Rodriguez could have answered that question. Human technology had developed differently from galactic standard. While most species focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, humans had perfected stealth technology and kinetic weapons. The AI ships used human innovations in materials science and sensor masking. They were designed by the same minds that had created the railguns that tore through Zephyrian armor at Proxima Centauri. But the worst was yet to come. In a secret laboratory hidden in the asteroid belt, human scientists worked on something that would have horrified even their own people if they had known about it. They called it the Genesis Protocol. Using genetic samples captured from Zephyrian prisoners, the scientists had created a biological weapon specifically designed to target Zephyrian physiology. It was engineered not just to kill, but to make death slow and agonizing. Dr. Helen Carter, Admiral Carter's younger sister, led the research team. She had volunteered for the project after seeing footage of the massacres at the mining stations. "The weapon is ready for testing," she reported to Dr. Rodriguez via encrypted communication. "Test subjects?" Rodriguez asked. "We have 50 Zephyrian prisoners from various battles, including some civilians we captured from damaged ships." Rodriguez hesitated for a moment. In her mind, she could see the faces of the children who had died at Omega-7. "Proceed with testing." The tests were conducted in a sterile facility on a remote asteroid. The Zephyrian prisoners, both military and civilian, were exposed to the weapon in controlled doses. Hidden cameras recorded everything. The biological agent worked exactly as designed. The aliens died slowly, their scales turning black as their organs shut down one by one. The civilians suffered just as much as the soldiers. Children died just as painfully as adults. Dr. Carter watched the recordings with a mixture of satisfaction and horror. "The weapon is 100% effective," she reported. "Death occurs within 72 hours in all cases." Somehow, recordings of these tests were leaked to galactic media networks. Within hours, every species in the galaxy had seen footage of human scientists deliberately torturing alien prisoners to death. The reaction was immediate and universal horror. In HFY, the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions were called. Species that had remained neutral suddenly began choosing sides. but not the side most humans expected. "They've become monsters," declared the Altarian ambassador. "These humans are a threat to all civilized life." The Nexari delegate agreed. "We're watching the birth of a species that has abandoned all moral restraint. If we don't stop them now, they'll spread this plague of savagery across the galaxy." Even some human colonies began questioning Earth's tactics. On the mining world of Kepler 186f, Governor Maria Santos called for an end to the biological weapons program. "This isn't who we are," she broadcast to Earth. "We're becoming the very evil we're fighting against." But on Earth itself, public opinion remained solidly behind the war effort. General Webb had overseen the complete militarization of human society. Factories that once built consumer goods now produced weapons. Schools taught children how to fight alongside mathematics and literature. The colonial populations, hardened by life on frontier worlds, embraced the total war doctrine with frightening enthusiasm. To them, the choice was simple: victory or extinction. Admiral Morrison, now Earth's supreme military commander, addressed the growing criticism in a speech broadcast across human space. "Some of you question our methods," he said. "You say we've become monsters. Maybe you're right. But I ask you this. What would you rather be? A living monster or a dead saint?" He paused, looking directly into the camera. "The Zephyrians chose to make this a war of extermination. They chose to target our civilians, our children, our future. We're simply fighting by the rules they established." The speech was also broadcast across the galaxy by alien intelligence services. The reaction was predictable horror and calls for immediate action against humanity. But the Galactic Council faced a growing problem. 3 of their major member species had already withdrawn from the organization. The Krillian merchants had declared neutrality and closed their trade routes to Council members. The Nexari technocracy had sealed their borders. Dozens of smaller species were questioning whether the Council's authority was worth the devastation this war was bringing. Speaker Veltar convened what would be the most important council session in 50,000 years. As he looked out over the partially empty chamber, he realized that humanity's rejection had accomplished something no military force ever could. They had broken the galactic order simply by refusing to accept it. The ancient Etherian stood slowly, his luminous form dim with exhaustion. "Honored delegates," he began, "we face a crisis unlike any in our recorded history. The human species has forced us to confront a terrible question." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Is our civilization worth preserving if it requires us to become as savage as those who threaten it?" Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species waited for an answer that would determine the future of the galaxy. The message arrived at Earth on all frequencies, ensuring every human would hear it. Speaker Veltar himself appeared in the holographic transmission, his ancient form seeming smaller and more fragile than before. "People of Earth," the Etherian began, his voice carrying the weight of 100,000 years. "The Galactic Council formally withdraws all previous demands against your species. We offer complete recognition of human sovereignty over your current territories. We grant you full exemption from all galactic hierarchy protocols. We guarantee complete non-interference in human affairs." The offer represented everything humanity had originally wanted: freedom, independence, security. It was total victory for human objectives and complete collapse of the system that had governed the galaxy for 50,000 years. "We ask only for cessation of hostilities and a return to civilized conduct," Veltar continued. "The galaxy bleeds from this conflict. Billions suffer. We beg you to accept peace." Admiral Carter called an emergency meeting of Earth's leadership. The conference room in New Geneva Station was packed with military commanders, colonial governors, and government officials. Everyone knew this moment would determine humanity's future. The debate was surprisingly brief. Governor Pete Sullivan of New Terra spoke first. His world still bore scars from Zephyrian bombardment, but his people had survived. "They offer us peace after murdering our children," he said simply. "They want to negotiate after attempting genocide. My answer is no." Governor Maria Santos, of Kepler 186f disagreed. Maybe we've won enough. Maybe it's time to stop before we become something we can't recognize. General Webb stood up, her uniform decorated with medals from a dozen battles. The Zephyrian Empire is collapsing. Their civilian infrastructure is in ruins. Food riots are spreading across their core worlds. Their military can barely protect their own shipping lanes. Dr. Rodriguez presented intelligence data. 40% of Zephyrian civilian shipping has been destroyed by our AI units. Their economy is failing. Some of their colony worlds are already surrendering to human forces. Admiral Morrison provided the military assessment. We're not just winning this war. We're breaking their entire system. Every species in the galaxy is watching. Some are already defying Council authority because they saw what happened when we said no. The vote was taken by Secure Communication Link, connecting every human world and military unit. Representatives from mining stations, research facilities, military bases, and colonial governments all cast their ballots. The result was overwhelming. Humanity rejected the peace offer by a margin of 87%. Admiral Carter delivered Earth's response personally. The transmission was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Council had 50,000 years to build a just system, Carter said. Instead, you created a hierarchy based on age and power. You had the opportunity to prevent this, war through justice. Instead, you chose to reward aggression and murder. She paused, looking directly into the camera. Now you offer peace because you're losing, not because you've learned anything about right and wrong. Humanity's answer is simple and final. No. Carter continued with demands that shocked even human allies. We will accept only one outcome: complete dissolution of the Zephyrian Empire, war crimes trials for their leadership, and dismantling of the Council's hierarchy system. Until then, we will continue our operations against all Zephyrian assets and any species that supports them. The rejection triggered panic across the galaxy. The Council's remaining authority collapsed almost immediately. The Krillian merchants formally declared independence from Council oversight. The Nexari technocracy sealed their borders completely. Dozens of smaller species announced they would no longer follow Council directives. For the first time in galactic history, the ancient order was crumbling. The final phase of the war was not glorious. The Zephyrian Empire fragmented as internal rebellions broke out. Some worlds surrendered directly to human forces, hoping for mercy that rarely came. Others fought to the bitter end. The AI ships continued their relentless campaign. Zephyrian civilian shipping became extinct. Entire trade routes were abandoned. Planets that had imported food for thousands of years began to starve. Emperor Zethmore made his last stand on the fortress world of Kepler 438b. The planet's massive defensive installations had never been breached in a million years of warfare. The siege lasted 2 months. Human forces surrounded the world and systematically destroyed everything on the surface. When Zethmore finally surrendered, it was not to save his own life, but to prevent the complete extermination of his species. The Emperor was transported to Earth in chains, the first galactic leader ever held accountable by a younger species. His trial was broadcast across the galaxy, showing kings and emperors what happened to those who challenged humanity. 1 year after the war's end, Admiral Morrison stood before the new Confederation Assembly. The building was smaller than the quarry. Old council chambers with seats arranged in a simple circle. No species sat higher than others. The Etherians attended, but their delegation consisted of only 3 individuals from their home world. Their vast empire had been reduced to a single planet and a handful of ships. They served as a living reminder of what happened when ancient authority met human determination. Morrison's speech was simple and direct. "We never wanted to rule the HFY galaxy," he said. "We just wanted to live free. You forced us to prove that freedom is worth any price. We hope you remember that lesson." Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of species listened in respectful silence. Some hated humanity for what they had done. Others admired their determination. All feared them. The galaxy now lived under a new form of peace. It was built not on hierarchy or tradition, but on absolute deterrence. Everyone understood the simple rule: cross humanity and face complete destruction. Trade slowly resumed along new routes protected by human AI ships. Conflicts between species were settled through negotiation, knowing that violence might attract human attention. The old system of strong preying on weak was replaced by enforced equality. Dr. Rodriguez, now serving as Earth's foreign minister, often wondered if they had become the very monsters they had fought against. But when she looked at the children, playing safely in human colonies, she found her answer. They had chosen to become monsters so their children could remain human. The Prometheus ships still patrolled space, their AI minds programmed with simple directives. Protect human interests. Maintain the peace. Show no mercy to those who threaten freedom. In the deepest archives of Earth's government, recordings of the biological weapon tests were sealed away. Future generations would judge whether the price of freedom had been worth paying. But for now, human children grew up free. They learned about science and art and literature. They dreamed of exploring new worlds and making great discoveries. They did not learn about the monsters their parents had become to give them that freedom. The galaxy had peace. It was an ugly peace, enforced by the threat of total war. But it was peace nonetheless. And in the darkness between stars, the AI ships waited, watching, ready to remind anyone who forgot the lesson of human determination. The age of hierarchy was over. The age of fear had begun. The Battle of Proxima Centauri began like every space battle in galactic history. Two fleets faced each other across the darkness, weapons charging, shields powering up. Admiral Korthak deployed his 3,000 ships in the traditional Zephyrian sphere formation. This allowed him to bring overwhelming firepower against any target. Admiral Morrison positioned his 50 ships near the orbital shipyards of Proxima B. From a distance, it looked like a standard defensive formation. The Zephyrians expected the humans to try holding their ground until reinforcements arrived. The first exchange of fire went exactly as predicted. Zephyrian plasma cannons tore through human shields like paper. The energy beams could melt a ship's hull in seconds. Human railguns and missiles hit back, but they barely scratched Zephyrian armor. Within 2 hours, Morrison had lost 8 ships. The human fleet was falling back toward the planet, shields failing, hulls burning. To any observer, it looked like another quick Zephyrian victory. Admiral Korthak opened a communication channel to the human fleet. His voice carried the confidence of certain victory. "Human Admiral, your resistance is admirable but pointless. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions." Morrison's response confused the Zephyrian commander. "Admiral Korthak, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding about this engagement." "What misunderstanding?" Korthak asked, genuinely curious. "You think this is a naval battle between two civilized fleets?" Morrison said calmly. "You're wrong. This is an extermination attempt on our species. We're responding accordingly." Before Korthak could ask what that meant, the human fleet did something that shocked every alien watching. The remaining 42 human ships suddenly broke formation. Instead of fighting as a coordinated fleet, they scattered in all directions. But they weren't running away. They were charging directly at individual Zephyrian vessels. Captain Lisa Kane was the first to reach her target. Her destroyer, the UES Defiant, accelerated straight toward a Zephyrian cruiser. The alien ship's weapons tore her hull apart, but Kane kept flying. At the last second, she activated her ship's antimatter charges. The explosion lit up space like a newborn star. When the light faded, both ships were gone, but the blast had also destroyed 2 other Zephyrian vessels that were too close. Across the battlefield, 41 other human ships were doing the same thing. They ignored their own safety, their own lives, everything except reaching the enemy and detonating. Admiral Korthak watched in horror as his fleet began to dissolve. He had never seen anything like this. In 10,000 years of galactic warfare, no species had ever used suicide tactics on this scale. "All ships, target the human vessels," he ordered. "Stop them before they reach us." But the human ships were fast and small. They weaved between the massive Zephyrian vessels using their size advantage. Some were destroyed before reaching their targets. Others made it through. Commander Pete Sullivan aimed his ship at the Zephyrian flagship itself. The Devastator's point defense systems fired desperately, but Sullivan's ship was too close. He crashed into the bridge section and detonated. Urian. Explosion crippled the command ship and killed Admiral Korthak instantly. The Zephyrian fleet lost its coordination as communication systems failed. But the horror was not over. The few surviving human ships began doing something that made even their own people sick with disgust. Captain Roy Mitchell, his ship too damaged to reach another target, turned his weapons on Zephyrian escape pods. The small craft held survivors from destroyed ships, wounded aliens trying to flee the battle. Mitchell's railguns tore through the defenseless pods like tissue paper. Other human ships joined him. Within minutes, hundreds of Zephyrian survivors were dead. The aliens had never seen anything like it. In 50,000 years of council-mediated warfare, there were rules. Survivors were rescued. Prisoners were taken. Medical ships were protected. Humans ignored every rule of civilized combat. News of the battle reached the Galactic Council within hours. Automated Zephyrian beacons transmitted the footage across the galaxy. In the council chambers, representatives watched in stunned silence as human ships hunted down escape craft. Speaker Veltar's luminous form flickered with distress. "They're targeting non-combatants," he whispered. "They're killing survivors." The Krillian merchant representative stood up, his multiple arms shaking. "This is barbarism. No civilized species would do such things. They've abandoned all pretense of civilization," agreed the Nixari delegate. "They're acting like wild animals." Around the chamber, dozens of species representatives began demanding action. Some called for immediate intervention to stop human savagery. Others suggested that maybe the humans needed to be completely destroyed before their madness spread. Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Carter received Morrison's final transmission. The UES Retribution was the last human ship left in the battle, surrounded by enemy vessels. "Admiral Carter," Morrison said, his image flickering on the damaged communication system. "Tell Earth what happened here. Tell them we understand the rules now." "What rules?" Carter asked. Morrison smiled grimly. "Their rules. No mercy, no prisoners, no quarter given or asked. If they want to exterminate us, they'll have to kill every last human in the galaxy, and we'll make them pay for it." The transmission cut off as the Retribution rammed into a Zephyrian carrier, taking both ships into oblivion. The Battle of Proxima Centauri was over. The Zephyrians had won the field, but at a terrible cost. They had lost 1,200 ships and 300,000 personnel. It was the worst military disaster in their empire's history. More importantly, they had learned something terrifying about humans. This young species was willing to abandon every rule of warfare rather than accept defeat. Emperor Zethmor received the battle reports in his palace on the Zephyrian homeworld. His advisors expected him to celebrate the victory. Instead, he stared at the casualty numbers in growing alarm. "They destroyed 1,200 ships with 50 vessels?" he asked. "Yes, my emperor," his military advisor confirmed. "But they used suicide tactics. No civilized species fights this way." Emperor Zethmor walked to the great window overlooking his capital city. Millions of his subjects lived in the sprawling metropolis below. For the first time in his long life, he wondered if they were safe. "Contact the fleet commanders," he ordered finally. "Tell them to mobilize every ship in the Empire, all of them." "My emperor?" the advisor asked. "Surely that's not necessary for such a small enemy." Zethmor turned back to his subordinate. His eyes held a fear that had not been there before the battle. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "We're not fighting a small enemy. We're fighting a species that has decided to abandon civilization itself rather than surrender. That makes them the most dangerous enemy we've ever faced." Across the galaxy, other species were reaching the same conclusion. Humanity had crossed a line that no one else had ever dared cross. They had chosen total war over total defeat. The Question now was whether galactic civilization could survive contact with a species willing to destroy everything rather than bow down.